You are listening to the Stand Out Now podcast with your host, Dave Mendonca. Check out each episode as top experts share their proven marketing, publicity, and sales tips to help you cut through the advertising noise so you can reach your ideal clients, get noticed, and connect with powerful influencers. The Stand Out Now podcast is brought to you by podcastinterviewexperts.com, helping entrepreneurs attract clients through business podcast guest appearances.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for listening. Our guest is the owner of Authors on Fire, which helps author entrepreneurs advertise, build, and grow their platforms on Amazon. Shaun Hibbs, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate you having me on.
My absolute pleasure, sir. All right. So, Shaun, this is what I ask everybody who attends or is on the show. When you were a kid, what marketing or sales strategies, knowingly or unknowingly, do you use or did you use to get what you wanted?
I've got a funny story, actually, Dave, about that. I don't know if I was actually willingly using these marketing and sales strategies, but it was sort of a strategy that I used to convince my mom to, buy these books that I wanted from the Scholastic book fair that we used to have at our school. And let me tell you a little bit of a backstory about that. So when I was about in grade 2, grade 3, I think it was, what had happened to me was something that was pretty traumatic to me at the time. I was told to stand up in front of the class and read The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss, a normal traumatic part of any childhood, right? But anyways, I remember getting up there and I was so nervous, and I remember just holding the book, The Cat in the Hat, and I was so nervous, I was shaking like a leaf, and then I had to read out. I looked at the book, and when I read the words, they seemed to make sense, but then when I read them out, my words came out jumbled. And I was told that I actually had a reading and writing disability by the school system, which may not be the best people to tell you that your kid has a learning disability. Yeah. But so anyways, I was told I had a reading and writing disability, and I worked with a teacher, Miss Golding, for about 3 years. And I started really advancing past my peers. But one of the things that she really helped me with, that are entrepreneurs who want to use their book or leverage their book on Amazon, they might think these things as well, as who am I to share my message? And it really comes down to, these things that happened as a child. And so I worked with Miss Golding, and after about 3.5 years, I became really, above my peers. And one of the things that I really got excited about was the Scholastic Book Fair. And we used to get this pre-order catalog, Dave. And in this pre-order catalog, there was all the, latest children's authors and things like that. And I used to get so excited when I got this thing. I remember getting it like on a Friday afternoon, and our teacher used to get us to go home. And I had a major insight when we did this, but I didn't realize at the time what it was about, but it really, ignited the spark for the work that I do with authors today. But one of the things that we did, we had to come back on after the weekend and give us, we had to come and basically go off and figure out, the top 10 books that we wanted. And so the next day, or Monday, we would come in and we'd share the books. And what I noticed, one of the insights that I had was that, about 70% of the class had chosen the same 5 books out of the 10 books that they had chosen. And this was a real insight for me. And I said, what's going on here? And what I realized is that the same core principles really that in that Scholastic book catalog in 1992, pre-internet, was the same principles of really why authors become national bestsellers versus they don't sell any books at all. And so that was an interesting insight that I had. But that Scholastic catalog, I was able to convince my mom of the books that I wanted to purchase. And it was really because of the way that the book looked and the way the author, the way they were promoted in that catalog. So, that's kind of my experience.
So the insight was how the book was promoted in the catalog? Was that?
Yes. Yeah, that was a big part of it. Yes, for sure.
Okay, so what was it? Like, what did you know? Was it colors? Was it the way, the printing? Like, what stood out? Yeah,
sure. I don't know if you've ever seen The Wolf of Wall Street, the story about Jordan Belfort. Are you familiar with that, Dave?
Yes.
Sure. One of the scenes in the movie, near the end of the movie, was this idea of, and this is the cliche of selling anything, right? Is where Jordan Belfort basically goes around to the audience and he says, sell me this pen, right? And, this one guy gets up there and he says, this pen is for professionals, and this pen, it's lightweight, and it, you can write longer with this pen. And Jordan Belfort, says, no, that's not right. Then he gets 10 other people to stand up there. And the whole point of what he was trying to prove there was the idea that we're really selling based on emotion versus logic. And I think the big insight there was that, the authors who promoted their books were actually using emotion versus logic. So one of the things that they were focusing on was really the pain points that a child may be struggling with, like Robert Munch, a well-known Canadian author. A lot of his stories are relatable to some of the things that kids are struggling with. And so the realization really, and how people that are bestsellers who are able to sell their books, they really focus on a core pain point of their audience, and they focus on emotion. And really the issue that I was struggling with, as a child, struggling with reading and writing, that was really presented to me by the books that I was buying. And so my mom was then inclined to buy those books because she knew I was struggling in that area. So that's really what I find the difference between the books that do really well versus the books that don't do so well, is that they really appeal to that emotional part of the brain and versus logic. Does that make sense, Dave?
Totally makes sense. I just like the arc that we're hearing about. Like, you had the reading disability, you had that very kind teacher who worked with you. You noticed, like, in that catalog, just the way it was promoted, how it was very appealing. And then you developed this, like, passion for books. And from what I understand, that just grew and grew and grew as you gotten older. So you had this passion for reading and for books. And just curious, when you were like a teenager, early 20-something, did you have like any jobs or anything that were related to the publishing industry, or was it just a hobby, like just to read? Like, what was the career situation at that point?
Yeah, I mean, Dave, my career path went all over the place. So I spent some 7 years in the military. And one of the things that's really relevant to the work that I do with authors today is that I was really repressed in terms of my ability to be creative and my ability to really follow the passions that I wanted to do. So, reading was something I was ultimately passionate about. In another life, I may have went to school for journalism or some other, form of writing. But ultimately, I was in the military for about 7 years at a really young age, starting at 18 years old. Really what that experience did for me was really ignite this passion for being an author myself and helping authors. I was really ignited because I had been repressed for so long working this job. And it's very similar to probably a lot of entrepreneurs, who end up becoming entrepreneurs or end up becoming authors, is that ultimately they had a career where they may have been working a 9 to 5 and they were stuck in that. And ultimately what they really wanted to do, what they were passionate about, was really repressed. And I think that's really the spark or the passion that really ignited for me. And I guess you could, authors on fire, right? Because of the passion behind it. That's kind of where I started. But it really came from that desire to really follow a passion and break through that 9 to 5, which is a big false belief that people believe they can't be successful when, to work outside of a job. And I think that's really where I got excited about things, was when I wasn't able to follow that passion. Does that make sense, Dave?
Complete sense, Shaun. So take me back. You're 18 years old. Why the military? What are you doing?
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's, I grew up in St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. And if anybody's familiar with that area on the eastern seaboard in North America, I don't know if your listeners, they're international listeners too, right,
yep,
Dave? So
you got it.
Just to kind of give people context, St. John's, Newfoundland was a pretty economically sound place, I guess you can say. So when I was 18 years old, 2001, I think 2001 or so, if my numbers are right, there wasn't a lot going on in St. John's, Newfoundland. So, of course, one of the things that, you could get instant gratification in terms of a career and make money right away was to join the military. And so because there weren't many options for jobs back then, that's why I chose the military. And ultimately, that was a mistake. But, you learn a lot of core principles in the military that you can apply to the rest of your life. Ability to work hard, the ability to work as a team, those kinds of skills. But ultimately, doing the job that you most hate is how you figure out, or doing things that you don't like.
Yes.
And going out into the world at a really young age is really where you learn your lessons. So I had an opportunity at a really young age to really learn the lesson that this military wasn't for me. And this is ultimately what led me to today.
Wow. So what was the rock bottom point? Were you like peeling potatoes or something?
Actually, Dave, I fell off a tower, a 35-foot tower.
Whoa.
And had a rappelling accident and nearly died.
Oh my God.
In the military. And so ultimately after that accident, I wasn't in full health. Wow. And I fully recovered. It took me about 6 months to actually learn how to walk again. And that was a really, a big challenge for me. So after that accident, I was sort of finished with the military at that point, and I ended up medically releasing from the military. And ultimately, what's really interesting about that is that milestone of that injury, of course, it was very tragic, but that was really ultimately what literally slammed me into the life that I'm living right now. So if that accident didn't happen, I may have, stayed in the military and served 20 or 30 years. And I might not be here to talk about it today, Dave, because I might not be alive, right? So that accident really was the lifesaver for me, but a massive turning point for me in my life. And that's when I followed this path to help authors.
First off, I'm glad you're okay and that all worked out, and it provided like an awakening, an aha moment for you. And
for sure.
your clients and the people that follow you, they're reaping the rewards because you made that choice at that juncture of your life. Wow. So tell me about getting on this journey. So from what I understand, after the military, you started dabbling into internet marketing.
Yeah. It was really interesting. Pre-internet era in the 1990s, right? You're probably around the same age as me, Dave.
Correct.
But around that era, pre-internet, in the 1990s, I remember when we first got a computer, and at that time, I think only 10% of families had computers, and of those 10%, only 1% of them had the internet. But I remember at about 14 years old that we ended up getting a computer, and that was my first touch point with the internet. And I just remember, downloading MP3s and being like, "Hey, John, how many MP3s do you have on your computer?"
Oh,
I've got 15, I've got Britney Spears, And I remember downloading like videos and MP3s, and that was the big thing, and people used to have these open website, not even websites, but open servers where people could get access to their servers, and download MP3s and stuff. So, that's really where I started on the internet. And that was like, almost pre-internet era. And so I was really excited about the possibility. I was creating websites and things like that when I was 13, 14 years old. Of course, I got focused on the internet, on the military and going down that path. And I left all that alone. And so, after the military, there was quite a passion for, the internet and digital marketing and things like that. And so that's kind of where the focus point started. But like I said, it went back to when I was a kid and that passion for literature that was ignited from working with a reading and writing teacher. And that was really where it all came from. And so what happened with the internet and all these other things, that was a passion of mine as well that I had left before I was in the military. But then what ultimately happened was I got back to the roots of really what excited me, and it was reading and writing. And so, the possibility of combining that with the work that I do with clients on the internet was the birthplace of, or the birth idea, I guess, of Authors on Fire. The possibility where you could, I could be writing and also helping other writers. And that's really where it all came from.
Do you remember when that clicked for you, when you're like, I have this passion for reading, writing. I have this knack for internet marketing. And then it all came together. And you're like, whoa, I can use these powers to help entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Do you remember when that happened?
Yeah, sure, Dave. It was about 4 years ago, actually. I've been working with clients for about 10 years in the digital marketing space, doing social media marketing, pay-per-click advertising. But about 4 years ago, and specifically, I guess actually more like 2 years ago, I was in the midst of writing the first book that I had written, The 3 Weird Marketing Secrets of Successful Authors on Amazon. It's a mouthful, but it's a nice little pithy primer for authors. But I was in the midst of writing that book. And when I went to go and find information about advertising your book on Amazon, there wasn't a lot of information available to me. And I realized at that moment it sort of clicked. And before then, I had tried all kinds of different avenues to start a business. I had done affiliate marketing even at one point for multiple businesses. I was selling how to recondition battery courses to, how to do, selling survivalist kits. on the internet and, selling cell phones on Kijiji, which ultimately that was actually a pretty profitable thing that I did. But anyways, outside of that, there was so many different things that I'd done to try to make money on the internet. And one of the things that clicked when I started writing this book was really there was no information that was available to help authors to leverage their books on Amazon. And one of the reasons why I found out later, Dave, and this is really the big insight that created this company, was that the reason why is because traditional publishers still aren't focused. They still don't do focused strategies on Amazon. And the reason why is because of the royalty structures of traditional publishers. So if you didn't know this, Amazon's actually the leading distributor. They distribute and sell 90% of all ebooks, 80% of all audiobooks, and 50% of all paperbacks in the US are sold on Amazon. So they're the biggest worldwide retailer, yet 1 out of 10 of the top bestsellers that you see who are working through publishers aren't actually using Amazon in the way that it's meant to use in terms of paid media. So that was really the big insight for me, was that no one else was really, there's a few people doing it, but no one else was really talking about how to leverage books on Amazon through paid media. And that's really where the opportunity came from. That was the big insight that I had.
Right. So, Shaun, okay, so I am an entrepreneur. Okay. And I want to increase my platform. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I consume social media. I consume video, podcasts. Why should I do books? Like, aren't books not relevant anymore? Why books?
Yeah. So, I mean, to write a book, it's still a major, differentiator for entrepreneurs. In a lot of the markets these days online, on Facebook, Google, it's very competitive. So the simple reality is that promoting a book on Amazon and writing a book is also something that not everybody's doing. The big thing I always say is that, the things that we avoid are the things that take a lot of time. And to write a really good book, I mean, it's a heck of a thing to do, to actually sit down and write a 200 to 300 page book. And so what I often find is that authors become blocked because they say, well, why would I spend all this time writing a book? And the simple reality is it's really the gateway into becoming an influencer, a thought leader. It leads you into being featured in the media. It's kind of the touch point of any public relations strategy that you're going to do. Either you're getting featured on podcasts or you're getting featured in the media. A book is really that touch point, Dave. And I think that anybody that we listen to or were influenced by in the media or any capacity online, people like Gary Vaynerchuk, in his book Crushing It, or people like Russell Brunson in his book Expert Secrets and .com Secrets, influencers like that. Deepak Chopra, for example, I mean, the guys wrote 89 books, right? So a lot of the people that are really in the influencer space, that are really inspiring and changing the lives of others, they have a book. So, I mean, it's really, it's very important that if you're looking to influence in any capacity, that you write a book. I think in the other element to this that a lot of people don't look at is it also gets you to, and this is a demographic that's often not spoken about, Dave, is that readers are actually a specific market. And as you just mentioned, why would you write a book? Because there's so many other channels or things that you can do. And the reality is that what a book does is it gives you a chance to focus on the audience of readers. And specifically what people don't understand is that, when you focus on readers, you're really generating a whole entire fan base that are focused on people who just read books. And ultimately, that's really the fan base that you want to get to. And that's specific with Amazon these days. There's 300 million people on there. But being able to appeal to readers, it's a very specific demographic. And it's usually a demographic of people who are going to share your message to millions of people. And so that's really the main reasons why, investing time in a book is very important.
Got it. Okay. So, Shaun, say there's entrepreneurs out there that want to get a book done, right? And maybe going through a traditional publisher is just too many hoops to go through, and they want to self-publish. Do you recommend self-publishing like with Amazon? Because it used to be CreateSpace, but I think it's different now. Like, do you recommend like the Amazon like in-house way to self-publish, or are there other websites you could recommend to self-publish?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to talk about the belief for a second that a lot of people have, and just kind of help your listeners really understand. A lot of people believe, first off, that they're not certified. They don't have an MBA. They don't have a PhD. They're not qualified or educated enough to write a book. And the simple reality is that if you're an entrepreneur and you have a business and you talk to your clients every day, you have the ability to write a compelling book. And the simple reality is this idea that we're not certified, I don't have an MBA, PhD. This is what makes people believe that they have to go through a traditional publisher. And now, don't get me wrong, Dave. I mean, traditional publishers have their place and they won't be going away. I think more so they'll be involved to start using some of these platforms more readily, like Amazon. But the simple reality is that if this is a block that's stopping you, it's probably why you're thinking that you have to go through a traditional publisher. One of the things I do recommend is that if you have the ability to work with a ghostwriter, if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have the time, and this is kind of what people don't realize, is that there's basically two types of people that put a book together. The first type of person is an author, and the author is the entrepreneur who, like your listeners right now who are listening, who have the ideas, they know the value that they bring to the market, and they know what really their listeners are going to find appealing. And then there's also a writer, and a writer actually wrangles words, and a lot of people don't realize this. You know, sometimes people say things like, oh, well, you know, that someone else wrote that book that wasn't written by that person. But in reality, it's the author and the writer. So the writer is really the person who wrangles words. And so, you know, the thing about writing a book is that you look at it like any other process that you might do from a marketing strategy standpoint. If you're going to do Facebook marketing and you don't have anybody in-house who does Facebook marketing, you're going to look at hiring someone, or you're going to look at getting someone in your team to do that for you, right? And it's also like that with a book. So if you think about your team, getting someone who's a good writer in your team, who might be a marketing person, to write the book while you come up with the ideas is really something that you can do that really makes it realistic for authors to think of a process that they could do, or entrepreneurs in their business that they could actually launch a book. So you don't need to be certified. You don't need an MBA, PhD. You don't even need to be a writer to come out with a book. So does that help clarify, Dave, for the listeners out there who are thinking about a self-publishing?
Sure, at some of it. Are there any website links? Like, say, entrepreneurs ready to go, ready to upload their book into a website. Yeah. Do you recommend like self-publishing within Amazon with a Kindle or a not CreateSpace anymore, but any websites?
Yeah, for sure. So specifically, if you're a self-publisher and you're looking to publish on Amazon, you know, it's pretty easy to do this process if you just jump over to Amazon.com. It'll explain the process to you. But one of the resources that I've been accessing is a really well-known guy, Dave Chazon. I don't know if you know Dave, but Dave's got a website called Kindlepreneur. I believe it's Kindlepreneur.com, and you can put it in the podcast description if you want. But, you know, Dave's a really good resource if you're thinking about self-publishing and you want to do it on Amazon. I think he offers a really good resource over there. That's a resource I've been accessing. Okay. So that's definitely a good link.
Okay, that's cool. Now, what's your take, Shaun, on this? Like, I've heard of entrepreneurs, what they'll do is they'll record their ideas like on their phone, like via audio, then get it all transcribed and mash a book together. Yeah. Okay, it's pretty quick, but, you know, is it a beautiful, shiny, like, you know, great book? Remains to be seen. Is that something you recommend? Like, entrepreneurs say they don't have access to a writer right away. They just want to like transcribe stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is as an entrepreneur, as I said, you know, the spoken word in the way that you're communicating with clients, the way that you're communicating with your team, there is gold there, but it's almost like gold mining, right? If you go out and you do a presentation, or you take those ideas and you record them and then you just kind of mash a book together, you're not going to do that well in terms of results. But if you actually go out and you're able to transcribe your thoughts and ideas that you present to your clients, and then take that and give it to a writer who's able to put a book together for you, then that would be sort of the best way to do it. And the simple reality is if you're going to invest time in any strategy, you're going to invest in getting people to do it for you and to get the right people to do it. And I think, you know, you could go on platforms like Upwork and pretty easily be able to find someone who can write a book for you, right, Dave? And I think even on LinkedIn, you can easily access people. There's so many writers out there. And the thing is that this is a passion industry, right? People who are writers are passionate about what they do. So it's really easy, I mean, to find writers who are willing to put a book together for you. And I think, being an entrepreneur and recording your ideas and putting them to a writer and getting them to put a book together, you could do that for probably $2,000 or $3,000 if you really wanted to, Dave.
For sure.
But yeah, I think it's a great idea to take the spoken word, the message that you spread to your audience and that you use to sell your services with your clients and all these things. Recording them and getting a writer to write it is a really good process.
Awesome. All right, Shaun, I think right now this question I'm about to ask is what the listeners have been waiting for this whole episode. Okay, you ready?
Sure.
All right, sir. So if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm super pumped to get my book promoted on Amazon. What are the step-by-steps to get that started? Yeah, sure.
There's just one thing that I always say, and I want to talk about this to your listeners who are probably thinking about writing a book, which is more likely the entrepreneurs may not have or be authors and entrepreneurs here. So one of the things that you really need to consider is looking at Amazon before you actually write your book. And the reason why is because, first off, you want to consider a type of, I'll give you an example. I was working with an author the other day, and he had a book that he had developed on franchising. And the thing about franchising is that it's a very small percentage of people who are entrepreneurs who actually want to franchise their business. And so what happened is he ultimately took this book and we tried to develop a strategy, and ultimately he had failed. He was barely able to sell more than a half dozen books. And the reason why was because he was focused very niche. And so, one of the things about entrepreneurs about being an author that's contradictory to being an entrepreneur is that as entrepreneurs, we target our business down and we target our audience down. So what we offer them is very specific. While with a book, you really want to have mass appeal to millions of people. And one of the biggest things that I find with, that are some of the mistakes is ultimately that authors don't consider what people are searching on Amazon. So there's a tool that I use as an example, KDP Rocket, where while I'm writing a book or thinking about writing a book or advising other authors who are writing a book, is to go out and actually think about the market you're trying to write for and actually find out what they're searching. So I use a tool called KDP Rocket where you can actually literally enter in terms that you might think consumers would search for your book or themes around your book. And you can actually find out how many people per month are searching for the concept in your book, which is very powerful. So before you sit down to write a book, think about what you want to write about, think about the market that you're in, and go out and actually do the research on Amazon. And like I said, KDP Rocket is a really great tool to be able to do that. Awesome.
So when you're doing that, like when you're writing your book, you also consider SEO, like keywords, stuff like that. Like when you promote, like I'm assuming you'd have to have the right keywords in your promotions too.
Yeah, for sure. So, the big thing is going out to Amazon and sort of finding out, it's not really changing your message more than it is catering your message to what people are searching. And when you do that, it's quite powerful. So, that really, from an Amazon perspective, when you go out and you find out which keywords people are searching, that's really a big part of the search engine optimization for your book. That's before you write. And then ultimately what happens when you do that, Dave, is that when you go to then take your book and you put it on Amazon, and you would do that through KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. If you go on Google right now and search Kindle Direct Publishing, all the instructions on how to do something like that would be laid out for you, where you could upload your digital copy of your ebook or your paperback version. But then what you would do is you would take those key phrases or those terms that consumers are searching, that you wrote your book on, that are popular terms, and you'd actually use those, you'd set them up with your books on KDP. Then from that point on, you can jump on and do things like paid media on Amazon. And of course, by this time, the fact that you wrote your book based on these keywords, it's very easy then to set up a campaign and advertise your book on Amazon.
So just go into more depth about the paid media. Like, where would we go? Like in Amazon, like it would say paid media on the page, like just for our listeners who are not familiar.
Yeah, sure. So, you can go to advertising.amazon.com, and that's the platform that you would go into to basically set up your paid media campaign. And like I said, that depending on the keywords, in terms of how you think about how to set up your book, like I said, some of those popular keywords that you use, you have the ability in a tool like KDP Rocket, as I mentioned earlier, where you can actually enter the keywords that you use for your book, and it will literally spit out hundreds of keywords that you can then use to set up your advertising. And quite literally, if you go to advertising.amazon.com, it's very easy to set up a campaign based on those keywords.
So it's not confusing, because I know like Facebook ads can get a little confusing.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, Amazon advertising, it's pretty simple to understand.
Okay.
Like I said, using those keywords and plugging them in should get you some decent results. Of course, that's what we do. We set up Amazon advertising for our clients. Yeah.
So when our listeners are doing that, what are some mistakes to avoid when they create their campaign?
I think some of the big things is looking at your book title, which is, like I said, understanding what people are searching and taking that information and catering your book title to that. So I'll give you a specific example. If you're teaching people about wealth and specifically passive income, then maybe somewhere in your book title you would want to include passive income. Or if you're writing a book about heart health, as an example, how to heal after having a heart attack or preventing a heart attack, maybe in the book that you write, you would want to have preventing a heart attack. And of course, those keywords are specifically related to what people are searching on Amazon. So that's a big thing. Another big thing is also how your book description is written. So, of course, if people are on Amazon and they're searching for your book, and your book comes up when they search a term like heart attack, as an example, and your book comes up and the title has heart attack in it, of course, people are going to want to click over to your book based on the title. Then when they come over and they look at the book description, one of the things that is very specific is that the keywords that, heart attack are also in the book description. So that's a big piece that a lot of people miss. Sometimes they'll write a book description based on, a description they have written on the back of the book, but they won't consider Amazon keywords. So book description, the book title. Of course, the number one thing that people look at is the book cover. So having a really good book cover design also is very important. So book cover design, book title, and then ultimately how you describe your book, which is ultimately about great copywriting. You want to use keywords that people are searching, and you want to be very specific in your book description.
Right. Now, in regards to book covers, like certain colors, like I know with Tim Ferriss, like the 4-Hour Work Week, right? The original looks different than the one that you see today. Today, it's all orange, right? So is there any psychology behind that in regards to covers from what you've seen and the people that you've talked with?
I think it's very specific to your market, but obviously clarity is a big thing. Having your book cover. Also, this is something that people confuse as well. Having a book cover title that's different than the title that you have on Amazon, which some people do, right? And that can be very confusing. But depending on the market, sort of dictates how your book cover design would go. But specifically, paying close attention to sort of a lot of the book trends that are happening right now. One of the ways that I go out, and I won't talk about specifics of how a book cover is designed because I'm not an expert in that area, but I am an expert in knowing what book cover designs will sell. And what I often do is I go out and I advise my clients and advise them to go out and look at other books in your book category. So you can jump on Amazon.com and just literally search some of the keywords I talked about earlier related to your book, and look at some of the books, how they're designed in your market. That'll really give you a telltale sign to the types of books. You look at the books that are really selling, who are the best-selling books on Amazon, and just notice what they're doing with their book cover designs. How is the text on the book? What kind of text are they using? What kind of fonts are they using? What colors are they using in your market? Things like that. What kind of pictures are they using? Are they using pictures or are they using illustration? Things like that. So I think really going out and looking at, how other books, they're covered, the types of cover designs they're using. Another example, like if you're writing children's books, obviously illustration is a big, appealing to children. Using illustration is a big thing, versus if you're, a nonfiction book, a lot of people like to have themselves on the front cover, right? So, like I said, it depends on your market, but look at what the best-selling books, look at what those book cover designs are like, and base your design from your choices based from those books.
For sure. Like I find the books that catch my eye are the ones definitely with a slick design, but also the title of the book. I'm seeing like over the past, I guess, decade or so, you're seeing books that have the big idea or like outcome oriented, like, 4-Hour Work Week. That's the big idea. Or a book like Profit First. It has an outcome in the title. Profit First. Whoa.
Yeah.
Those are eye-catching as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in talking about obviously entrepreneurs who are writing books, we're talking about the nonfiction category and business and money category specifically. And identifying the pain point right there, right? right at the, everybody wants to, for example, the book titled Profit First. Obviously, the number one thing or the number one problem that entrepreneurs have is that they want to generate more profit in their business. And so obviously that's a core challenge that people have. So having a book called Profit First is huge. But also I'd like to talk about the 4 quadrants that are really, or the 4 book categories that are the most popular that really you want to have your book in. Even if you're just like example, this client who had a book about franchising. Even though he had a book about franchising, he could also be in these 4 categories. And the 4 categories are health, wealth, success, and building better relationships. And that's really the 4 categories. Those are like the information marketing industry is a $355 million a day industry. And really those 4 quadrants, health, wealth, success, and building better relationships is really the core quadrants that you want to have your book in as an entrepreneur. And as an example, like with the franchise business, this client, chose to teach people about franchising versus talking about the mindset of franchising. And the difference is that it's really what you want to talk about in your book is the big picture. You don't really want to teach as much in your book versus actually giving people the big picture. And if you see all these books like Profit First, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as an example, Robert Kiyosaki is a big one. One of the things that's very specific about these books that you'll notice is that they're really talking about the big picture, right? Rich Dad, Poor Dad, for example, is talking about the mindset of what, rich kids have versus people, who grew up poor. And really the big insights, it's all about the mindset. And so when you think about writing a book, write it in those 4 quadrants and have it based on mindset versus heavy teaching.
Got it. This is some great stuff, Shaun. I'm glad I got you on the show because I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, some of which are listening to this podcast, thinking about doing a book, thinking about they may have a book, but how to market it. So this is really good insight. And Shaun, this is not the only opportunity for people to get your insight. Like you have a book yourself and you got a podcast. Can you talk about like everything that's going on with you?
Yeah, sure. So we've got a podcast called the Authors on Fire podcast. We're interviewing, some of the top best-selling authors to really bring insights on how you can market your book, specifically online on Amazon. And so that's our podcast, the Authors on Fire podcast, which you can check it out at auonfire.com. Another thing is that we also have a book called The 3 Weird Marketing Secrets of Successful Authors on Amazon. It's a mouthful. It's more of a pithy primer, but it really gives you the step-by-step process that you can actually take your book or your idea and actually create a book and then launch it on Amazon. So that's that book. And we're also coming out with a new book, Dave, called Your Advantage: Predictably Scale Your Author Platform Online, which is going to be coming out pretty soon. By the time you come out with this podcast, it'll probably already be live.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. A lot of things on the go. It's no worries. Shaun, man, listen, a lot's happened with you in your life. You went from being a kid who had a reading disability, then you went to the military, had that tragic accident, and you've really bounced back well, sir. And it sounds like, life is on a good track for you. And it's great to hear that you're helping a lot of authors, entrepreneurs with their businesses. Some good things, on the horizon for you. So thanks for being on the show, providing so much insight. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem, Dave. It's really great to have you. And like I said, can I just make a comment about, some of the things that I've been through? A lot of people out there, a lot of authors and entrepreneurs are struggling. And one of the biggest things is, trying to break through that 9-to-5 grind, just like when I was in the military. And so I just want to say to them, just as a last kind of thought is that keep on pushing through because it's hard to break out of that 9-to-5. It's hard to break out of this, sort of mindset that keeps you stuck, but it's possible and, it's easy. And, that's kind of the last insight that I have. Just keep pushing through, right?
Shaun, well said. Thank you, sir.
All right. Awesome, Dave.
Thanks for being on the show, man.
Okay. Cheers, man.
All right. Everybody, thank you for listening to this episode. Check out Shaun's stuff. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Stand Out Now podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and rate and review it as well. You can find out more about our program at thestandoutnowpodcast.com. Thanks again and enjoy your week.